So, we start in English. Hello, welcome, a warm welcome to everybody here at the Africa Day in Wandsbek in Hamburg. We just planning a discussion about the G20 partnerships with Africa, and you will recognize more about it during the discussion. And I'm very glad and happy to have a very distinguished panel here. My name is Falk Schlegel. I'm a journalist and also moderator today, and a nice warm welcome to everybody. This is my co-moderator. She is introducing herself.
Hello everyone, thank you for attending Africa Day 2017 and joining us for this interesting panel with our interesting guests. I'm Beatrice and I'm moderating for the third time Africa Day, and I'm just looking forward to a great discussion. So please, some people are standing so far away, maybe you just come in front of the stage so you can follow up the conversation, and later on if you want you can ask questions, so just feel free to be part of this conversation. And so I'm going to introduce Professor Dr. Asumah. Welcome, thank you for being here.
Thank you so very kindly. I'm glad to be here.
Maybe you could just introduce, tell us where you've been working, and so we have an idea about.
That is good. I come from the State University of New York. I'm a distinguished professor of political science and also chair of the Africana Studies Department. I love talking and I love publishing. I have about 11 books and over 120 articles to my name. My thing is going around the world to change young minds. The State University of New York is the largest higher education institution in the world. We have 64 campuses built by Governor Rockefeller, and every 20 miles at all you walk, you will find a university. And this is what makes the State University of New York a great place to be. And so, I bring you greetings from New York. New York is so New York, they name it twice, New York, New York. That is New York City, New York State. And so thank you so very kindly.
Thank you for the great introduction. And actually we were supposed to have Dr. Abdul Rashid Pelpuo on stage, but unfortunately he cannot be here. So just very spontaneous, we have a member of the Lampedusa group, so please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Bimbola, and I'm one of the speakers of the group Lampedusa in Hamburg. I study political science, and also presently I'm one of the lecturers at the Silent University, and I also do a lot of activism, and this is what I've been doing for the past 4 years. So I'm really glad that you give me the opportunity to be part of the podium. Thank you very much.
Thank you for attending, and now I have the honor to refer to you, Mrs. Ayeko-Kümmeth. You introduce maybe yourself also.
Thank you. My name is Ayeko-Kümmeth. I'm a doctor of political science with a specialization in development politics from the University of Bayreuth. I work as a lecturer, part-time lecturer with the UN Peace University Africa chapter, as well as Deutsche Welle, German's international broadcaster. And during my part-time, I work as a freelance consultant in development in Africa. I'm so happy to be here.
And last but not least, Mrs. Randzio-Plath, Christa Randzio-Plath, also introducing herself.
Hello, good afternoon. I am a professor also for European law, and I am a former member of the European Parliament, and I dealt a lot with the EU partnership, the JUST, and I was very happy to continue the work with this European-African partnership on the same level during the last 10 years, because I was working for civil society organizations within this context, and actually I'm also part of the civil society and women society engagement groups for the G20.
So, I am very proud to have you here on the stage to make this panel discussion, and what's about. It's about the G20 partnership with Africa. It's an initiative of the G20 states. It is in their concern to improve the situation in Africa, and what they suggest is to improve it via infrastructure investment, via private business investments. And we want to ask, is it good, is it not so good? What is necessary, what is included, what is not included, and we try to refer to different things, not only the G20 partnership with Africa, but also, for example, to the 2030 agenda, the international UN agenda for sustainable development, and different things. The first question I have, also Mr. Asumah, is for you and also for the others, because you are for the Africana studies, it is very interesting to have you vision on the Agenda 2063, which is another agenda by African states, by the African Union, made in 2013, towards their goal, the African development to the year 2063. What is it about in your point of view? Is it a good thing or not? I'm asking that because the G20 papers and, for example, the German Marshall Plan for the African development is always referring to that agenda by the African states.
Well, the G20 work is so very, very important. They are controlling about 85% of the world market. So it's something we cannot deal without. And so that is important. But the presence of Africa is highly questionable. You have the African Union represented, and also NEPAD, which is the new African Partnership for Development, is in there. But aside from South Africa, we only got 2 more people in this G20. So you have to come to the table with an agenda. We don't have many African countries on the G20 agenda, and that becomes very, very troublesome. Troubling in that it is important, but Africa has to be represented, on the G20, and those who are there are invitees. They are not members, they are invitees. Can you imagine when you are invited to a table or somebody's house, you know that you cannot say too much in somebody's house. And so that is the ramification of having a G20 with very, very few African countries represented. So I'm slightly skeptical. I'm slightly skeptical. Now, when you're looking at the notion of Africa itself and the vision that has been created is highly hope-affirming. Hope-affirming in that it's a vision of something to do in the future. There are no mechanisms to make it a workable vision. And again here, it is a good hope, it is a good vision, but here again, I am hopeful, but I'm not optimistic.
Okay, that's a statement. Now I want to ask Mrs. Ayeko-Kümmeth, also you have made a lot of inquiries into the perspective of African civil society, of African governments, and what is your perspective from, or what is your African perspective toward the Agenda 63 and the reference to it in the G20 partnership initiative?
Thank you. I think much as I agree with you, I tend to differ a little bit. And I would like to start from the middle starting point where you said if you're a visitor somewhere, you can't say much. I tend to differ a little bit. Visitors also sometimes have the capacity to let you change. I would rather we have the Agenda 2063 and 2030. I would rather we have the G20 And I would rather we have Africa partnering with the G20, because in my opinion, there is always a starting point. We cannot just say we don't want to be part of it, but there is a starting point, and once we are invited, then we can use that as an opportunity to bargain our position. Like you rightly said, we have one partner there, we have South Africa there, we always talk about South Africa, but we must come to terms with the reality that, why are we invited? We have to ask ourselves, why are we all of a sudden being invited to be part of this G20, even to be invited as guests? It's not always been the case. Whenever they meet as G20, they define the world, and Africa is left aside. Now that we are being invited, I think this is a starting point, and we should take it. It's our chance to grab the opportunity and tell them, everybody is running to Africa, Professor. You know that the Western world is running. Much as people are dying, unfortunately, we are flying this way, but people have seen there is lots of potential. And when we are guests on this table, we have to show our strengths. And so I don't want to be I don't want to be a pessimist here, but I would rather look forward and say it's a good thing, it's a good starting point, and we got to grab the opportunity.
Yeah, I said I'm hopeful but not optimistic. Those are the words, and that's a reality. Hope is all what it's all about. Thank you.
Yeah, Frau Randzio-Plath, Mrs. Randzio-Plath, you want to add?
I would say that the AU 2063 is a good approach, so there is an African vision for the whole continent. And I think it is really necessary that we have a continental approach if we discuss African Union, because the African countries are so different. You have to look from 1 to 54 countries. They are really different, but you could group them. That the groupment which has to be taken has to be done by the Africans themselves. It's neither Europe nor the G20 can decide in which regional cooperation framework the Africans want to cooperate. And I think this is very important. And therefore, I welcome very much this agenda. Concerning now the African approach in the G20 process, we have to understand that the G20 is an informal group with no democratic legitimation, which has created so that the leaders of this world can meet in difficult times. And this was very, very important when President Obama called this meeting during the financial crisis 2007 to 2009. And there, of course, only from these important countries, the fate of the world economy was dependent. And then the leaders of this world continue to meet every year. And therefore, you cannot now change the definition of the G20. Because for me, the democratic, legitimate world governance is the United Nations, not the G20. G20 is no world governance, and this we should really underline. And I'm also happy that also, for example, civil society of all G20 countries is also underlining this point. This does not mean that we don't participate in the discussion and ask what could be done, but nevertheless, it is up also to the Africans to define. And therefore, we have now in June the Africa conference in Berlin, where a compact with Africa is concluded. And we have up to now only a few African countries wanting to join, and we are not sure that all G20 countries will join. It is an initiative of the German presidency, and the German presidency did on the G7 in Heiligendamm the same. They invited African countries to be a guest. And since then, we have created the global funds and other things which help to fight illnesses in Africa. So there was an outcome in favor of African countries. And I hope very much that not only private investment promotion and private infrastructure measures on the basis of a proposal from World Bank and International Monetary Fund will do that. I think what has to be done is to support private African business, and not only in the towns, but also in the rural areas. I think this is very necessary.
What is your point of view, Mr. Abdul?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think from my own point of view, I see G20 as a globalization symbol of capitalism. And if I'm also allowed to make a little latitude from my own point of view, you can really see that it's only one African country that they are involved in G20, as the professor you said before. And if we also go back to the history, how could it possible that the African can try to negotiate with all the other G20 when we are not at the same level? And I really want us to know that, for me, I see the idea and the politics behind the G20 as a kind of neo-colonial project, because there is nothing they will discuss that will be in the favor of the African. And I want to remind us, one of the African fourth generation leader called Kwame Nkrumah on the 25th of May 1963. Kwame Nkrumah said that African can only shatter its cause when they are united and they responsible for their continent. I think the issue of Africa don't really concern the West. And I will make a little example if you really agree with me. If we could remember in the 1986, there is this young guy called Thomas Nkrumah. He came to the power, not well educated, but he came with ideas. And within 4 years, without the intervention of the West, Kwame Nkrumah transformed his country. And this is an idea, and this is from my own point of view, that we Africans can develop on our own without the interference of the West. From my own point of view, I'm against the G20. I see G20 politics idea as a kind of new project to promote neo-colonialism. So this is just my point. Thank you.
Thank you. This was a straightforward insight. So we have now on the panel also finally Dr. Abdul Rashid Pelpuo. You have been already listening. Everyone already gave their point of view about the G20 and also the Agenda 2063. Maybe you can just add something on that.
Well, thank you very much. In my view, getting together, the world getting together to unite against poverty, underdevelopment, terrorism is critical, it's very important. And so if there is any idea of people who want to come together, either they are Africans or non-Africans or Europeans or wherever continent they belong, if they come together with the sole aim of committing themselves to genuinely eradicate poverty, to genuinely promote development of the world, and to ensure that the African is not left behind in the development of the rest of the world, is good. My challenge, however, is an ulterior motive that some countries may have. If G20 is going to promote Africa's development, will enable Africans to produce for themselves and to trade with the world without the restrictions that we see now, and to unleash the energy of the African to be part of the world community, I have no problem. If G20 is to get the Africans together and we do the same level of trade that we do, that we have unequal relationship, that they produce and we buy, that we are at the underdogs all the time, G20 will not be of use. It will be an extension of the same unequal relationship and the same levels that brought poverty to the world. So I am of the opinion that the ideas of G20 should be laid clear. Is it going to be to ensure that the African produces for himself? Is it going to be citing factories in Africa and making sure the factories employ Africans and give them a technical training and enable them to produce for themselves and eventually take ownership of their own property and their own resources and their own countries? Excellent. If it is about producing in mainland Europe and exporting all the things to Africa, and then Africans see the attraction of running there rather than staying at home, G20 will not serve the purpose we are looking for. So I am thinking that we have to be open-minded, we have to be progressive in our thought, we have to allow a situation where G20 and Africans will commit themselves to some specific landmarks of development, and so we can support it, because it's going to be a long-term engagement, and it's going to ensure that for maybe another century, Africans will either be on the path of progress or path of retrogression. So that's my view about it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pelpuo. Just to introduce also a little bit, you are a member of the Ghanaian Parliament for the now opposition party NDC until the last elections in December 2016. You have been a Minister of State for Private Sector Development and Public-Private Partnerships as the President's office there, and you have been a member of the Economic Management team of Ghana. At present, you serve in the Parliamentary Business Committee, the Lands and Forestry Committee, and the Employment, Social Welfare and State Enterprises Committee. So you are dealing with the issues you just mentioned also, but where the initiative of the G20 is all about. And I just want to introduce what the G20 partnership is saying in a communique from the finance ministers who met in a small town in Germany in March in Baden-Baden, and the finance ministers committee, the G20 finance ministers communique said, we will deepen as well as broaden international economic and financial cooperation with African countries to foster sustainable and inclusive growth in line with the African Union's Agenda 2063. So that was what we also were already talking about. Now, you have been in this particular area for the private sector development, which the initiative is all about. You have been in the private-public partnerships area, working with multinational companies, also with small and medium-sized companies to consult with them about investments in Ghana. What can you say about the experiences you had in that area?
Well, first of all, it is important to note that Africa lags a lot behind in infrastructure development, and Ghana is not an exception. In Ghana, we have a gap of $1.5 billion investment every year for the next 1 decade, in order for Ghana to catch up with the kind of infrastructure that will allow for a middle-level income country to move from the lower level to a higher level. So we need a lot of partnership. Since we don't have that much money, we forged a partnership agreement, which is called a public-private partnership. We partner the private sector for the private sector to put its money in the development of certain kinds of projects which are high yielding, and the private sector will manage that, be able to recoup their money plus the profit they want, after which they then give the property or the investment back to the people of Ghana. So we try to do this mindful of the fact that we are more of welfare-oriented government rather than a profit-oriented government. In fact, we are mindful of the tradition set by Kwame Nkrumah himself, which my colleague made reference to. Kwame Nkrumah was interested in creating wealth for the benefit of the people. The means of production will be owned by the people, but you can come under the means of production to make profit as an individual. but the overall means of production will be publicly owned. For example, roads, schools, hospitals. These are things to be owned by the state. They may be public ownership. Essentially, we in Ghana are trying to create a condition for the people of Ghana to take ownership of the businesses in Ghana as much as they can, to be able to raise money to invest in Ghana by themselves, and to be able to raise money to create job opportunities for the young people. So we don't have backlog of unemployment and eventually have the people failing to stay in the country and then leaving for other countries. So all the investment we are looking out for is to create opportunity for increased investment, for job creation, for the people of Ghana to be able to take advantage of the opportunities available. And so all the partnership agreements we want are about creating jobs and about creating infrastructure, creating the needed infrastructure, roads, hospitals, educational facilities, railway, harbors, ports and harbors, and etc., etc. That will give a greater leverage for the people of Ghana.
Thank you very much. So I would like to ask Mrs. Dr. Jane Ayeko-Kümmeth, what do you think is not included in this compact with Africa? We had already an insight from Mrs. Professor Randzio-Plath, but maybe just for us to understand why this compact with Africa is not really at the moment maybe the right agreement or a way for Africans to really improve the economic situation and just to get on with their wealth. Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't really say that the compact is not the right thing at the moment. First of all, I stated my position at the very beginning that I do appreciate that we have this compact in the first place. Straight away to answer your question, what I find is not included is a clear strategy on how policy regulation is going to be carried out. Because when you look at the compact, like she rightly said, this time round, even when we come back to the G20, much as African states are not included, you do realize that other partners are included. The civil society is included, the business fraternity is included, NGOs are included. And if we reflect on all the developments that are taking place in Africa at the moment, the persons, the institutions that are actually behind this are not exactly government as such, but it's been spearheaded by NGOs, by the private sector, by civil society, and so on. So the fact that these institutions or these organizations are represented is a good thing. The problem here is that the pact, as well as the Agenda 2063, is all about private-public partnership. Now my question is, there are so many strategies, there are so many papers that have been put forward to promote this. He will probably testify from experience that where we fall short is the regulatory part of it. How do we do business without repeating the old song of corruption, without repeating the old song of non-functional institutions? We can talk about this private-public partnership, but if the institutions are not there, if they are not functional, if they remain on paper, then we are not moving forward. And I want to differ from my colleague here. It looks like 50 years down the road since the bigger part of Africa got independence, we are still singing the blame game. The white man did this for us, the white man did this for us, we are not involved. Why don't we say the white man is not doing it, let's do it ourselves? Okay,
thank you.
If they're not doing it, so let's do it ourselves. But if we continue singing this game and blaming, we did not come up with this pact, they came up with this pact, they decided to include us. Instead of saying, thank you, you've included us, let's take it forward. What are we doing? Blaming them. They only want to take our things. If you're not making use of it and I'm your neighbor, I will make use of it. Okay? This is what I'm thinking. We should go back and ask ourselves, if we are going to invite a German company to come and do business in Ghana, and this is the policy on the constitution, and whatever act you're doing, are these things implemented the way they are? Must this company give a kickback to get things done? If I have to get a license, why should I take 3 months chasing after the 3 years, simply because some bureaucrat is seated there and is not doing the things the right way? These are the things that we should be talking about, other than saying they only want to take our things. Even if you have a neighbor who has mangoes around and I don't have mangoes and you're not making use of them, I will come for them. If I see that you're making use of them, then you do it. If you want to guard your mangoes, you guard them rightly. So the thing is, yes, you want to do business with us, but let's have equal terms, let's have a starting point, let's get our own house clean and stop playing the blame game every now and then.
Thank you.
Should we take some questions? I will come to you with the microphone. Is that time for questions?
1 second.
No time for the question. We will take the question later. Don't worry.
Yes,
yeah?
Give your question.
Right.
1 second.
Yeah,
Professor. Yes.
After working for 30 years in this field, I think I know very much what goes on in the world. I've been all over the world giving talks on these issues. And one thing I will say that we cannot have our analysis just on the surface. There are two things driving what we are observing in Africa. We can look at systemic dynamics. You can call it a blame game or whatever you call it, it is there. How the international systems affect all African countries. That is systemic dynamics. The other is structural paralysis, where the African structures are also paralyzed. So you're looking at 2 points. You cannot look at one side, and you have to examine and re-examine, interrogate and re-interrogate both areas in order to have a good solution. Okay, so both sides are real. Honestly, both sides are real. And when Nkrumah said the independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked with the total liberation of countries in Africa, it is about liberation of the economy. It is about liberation of the people. It is about liberation of the mind. And we have not done that sufficiently. And it's about time we wake up and get involved with what we have to do. Thank you.
Thank you. But where is the African money? I will tell you that there is more money going to tax havens in Europe and the United States from the African states than being invested in Africa. And therefore, here in Europe, in the European Union, we are working for closing these tax havens so that African money can stay where it is and has to be invested in Africa. Because it is a problem also of the African elites that the state of Africa is so poor nowadays. And I am working in the grassroots level, and I'm supporting women's projects, especially professional qualification for women in the rural area. And I must say, what I don't like with the Compact for Africa is that infrastructure, it will be linked again to export industry. And I think we need an infrastructure which is related to the situation of the jobless youth, to the situation of the jobless or less earning women in the rural area. And there will be no foreign investment in the rural area because there will be no the profit which can be organized, for example, in the towns of Kenya or of Uganda. So I think that therefore the Compact has first to set standards for the investment and also the participation of German companies in Africa. We have to respect the ILO core standards. We have to respect the ecological standards. This is really necessary. And we have to engage with private enterprises who respect human rights.
Thank you very much. Just to take on the numbers you said, I want to add some numbers to it. The illicit financial flows from Africa to tax havens, for example, in 2014, it was the last number, approximately $90 billion. In 2004 prices, I have to add. And just to have the whole picture, or somehow one part of the whole picture, also to refer to other numbers. The official development assistance to Africa in 2016 was in the amount of money of, and the direct investments from the private business sector, almost multinational corporations who are investing in Africa, were approximately also $50 billion. But what is almost not so much known to the civil society or to the politicians in the countries, that the migrants, that the African diaspora is also contributing to the fight against poverty, is also contributing for sustainable development, and these are much more higher figures. In 2016 it is $60 billion, just to add the right figures to it. Right, and now we just want to open it for a discussion with the auditory also, and if you have some comments or some views to add, it would be really nice.
Okay, I'm taking the question there. The question, you can just come here over to talk to the microphone. I will come to you. You feel free to speak in German or any language. So, the first person.
I'm Wolfgang Breyer. I have studied history, political science, and athletics. I was a teacher for 40 years at a high school or at a gymnasium. I think so. So, I have some results of Africa. You have mines, you have copper, you have gold, you have tin, you have oil. That's very good. The diamonds are in Russian hands. The oil in the companies of American, Exxon, Mobil Oil, Shell, and so on. And the pure people of Africa are so pure because they get no money from this. The money was changed from the man, from the company to the oil company, and the whole people of Africa have nothing from that.
So you say...
And I want to ask you, why? You have copper, you have oil, you have diamonds, and why you can organize it so that all people have something from the wind or from the selling this resorts.
So we understand the question. Yeah, we understand it.
More questions before you answer?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, more questions. So you?
First of all, I thank the people who are organizing this program. It's very, very important that Africans and Germans or the whites get opportunity to discuss about these issues. What I've been hearing, I didn't come earlier, is academic discussions. We are just, golden castles in the air. Let us look at this place where we are. In Hamburg here, before 10 years, there were about 25,000 Africans living here. Such a very important program is going on. Look how many Africans are here. That's my point, first point. Then secondly, there was a discussion here that we've got independence for so many years. So we can't do the blame game. We have to do the blame game because we haven't seen the problems. We talk about it, but we haven't seen it. Go to Africa now. I was a teacher in Ghana. Go there 30 years back. What I learned is still being taught there. What I learned is being taught there. Why can our academics not talk about education? What we need in Africa is education. Adult education.
What is the
informal education? Yeah. Look at Hamburg here. I was among those who struggled for over 20 years to get a small room where we can help the children, African children who are here and who are not finding their way here. We fought for 20 years the state was not prepared to give us this room, just one room.
Thank you.
So you get always people who are talking for us. So if you think that Africans, we have to change our life, we have to do it, we haven't seen the problem. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
So thank you for the admission. You want to answer the 2 questions before we take the 2 other questions?
Yeah, maybe let them
okay,
answer.
we take 2 questions more. No problem. We'll take you soon. Let's answer the questions, right?
Okay, I will start with that very burning question over there. I do appreciate your concerns, but let me start from your last point of education. 30 years down the road, Ghana is still teaching the same education that was introduced by the colonialists. I will throw the question back to you. Is that a problem of the British that colonized Ghana? Are the British still dictating on the Ghanaian government that do not change your system? No. Have you tried to change the system of education? No. And the British have come back to say don't? No. So why do you continue blaming the British for introducing that kind of education when 30 years or 50 years down the road, you yourselves have not realized and woken up to say, wait, what these people were teaching us does not solve the problems. You change it. There's nobody stopping you from changing the education. You were a teacher. Did you make an initiative to change the education system? Yes. After realizing that it's not working, then you change it. So I don't think that it is still, I still say it's a blame game. You cannot be blaming these people for teaching us how the Dutch transformed their country to what it is. You can realize the problems of Ghana today and you change the system according to the trends. Even here, what was taught many years ago is not what they are teaching. So it's upon yourselves, it's upon Ghana to change the education system. I will quickly say something about why we are such a rich continent and have nothing to show. It takes 2 to tango. The terms of trade have not been balanced for so long. And now with this pact, with all the agendas that the African Union is setting up, this is our starting point to make sure the terms of trade are balanced. 2 years ago when the European Union summit met, or the G20 met in Malta, and they gave African countries so much money to stop our people coming to Europe, I really appreciate what the African government said. Thank you very much for the money, but for as long as the conditions and terms are not okay, we won't stop the people. That, for me, is a very, very good starting point. The moment we wake up and say, no, the terms of trade are not fair, then they will wake up and say, hey, these people are not sleeping anymore. But we are not going to sing the blame game. I'm sorry, I don't buy that school of thought.
Yeah, if I can say a little bit, I am an international examiner for PhD dissertations, and I go through all of Africa. I was just at the University of Ghana, Legon, and there is change. It is still not the British system. They are moving. To be honest, I come from the US. It is movement towards the American system, and so we're saying goodbye to the British system in Ghana, at least at higher education. So that is one export. Progress is being made, and I am part of the people who are going back and forth to make sure. I was supported by the Carnegie Corporation to make sure that these changes are being implemented. At the University of Ghana, I've been to University of Ibadan. So I'm moving around to make sure change is happening in Africa. 1. 2, you said it very, very well. We have about 15% of oil reserves in the global market, Africa. We also have about 40% of gold reserve and about 80% of platinum. Okay, so we have all these. The issue is, how do you transform raw gold? How do you interpret this when it comes to the marketplace to refine these issues? And if Ghana partners with Mobil or Shell, and they tell you for the next 20 years, your profit is only 15%, you are stuck. So something had to be done on the table when you are negotiating the terms of drilling oil in Ghana, which is happening right now, for example, and not just Ghana. Nigeria has tons of oil. Why is the state not stable? The question is, we have dealt too much with what I call state-centered state. The state takes care of itself. The state is anthropomorphic because it's a father figure. We need to move to society.
You mean?
Yes. Yes. We need to move to a society-centered state whereby private people are investing in the state. PPP has to work because it has to be public and private partnership to make sure these things are working. And that is so very, very important. We have to open our minds a little bit broader to re-examine these issues. So, and that anti-intellectualism got to go away. We have to re-educate ourselves. We've been miseducated, we have been diseducated, and we continue to gobble what we've been told in the ancient times. Let's move forward, people, and that is so very important.
So more now from Mr. Bimbola, also maybe referring to the question, why is it not profitable for the people in Africa to be rich?
I think my own idea is a bit different, and I want us to know that the problem of colonization is a problem and the struggle of the mind. There was a book that was written in 1933 by a black American, and the name of the book is Miseducation of the Negro. In the Miseducation of the Negro, Katajihu, he argued how the mind of the African is conditioned to behave the way we have. And I want to make a very clear example that we African, before we can experience a dynamic and a social economic progress, we need a mental revolution. And I will tell you this, if you also see how we African will behave on the little things, look at the continent of Africa, the most poorest continent under the earth, but we are the one who pay a lot of international exchange for what we don't need. For example, look at the artificial hair that our women they uses. You understand? This year, this thing is generated billions of dollars for the international beauty industry. Look at what is really happening even in Africa, the way we behave with ourselves. Look into the social, the religion, society, look into how we behave, look into our education system. There is no anything that is being taught that can really redefine our curriculum. If you look into our society, even the normal society we have in Africa, they are corrupt. And for me also, it is a problem of mind. And before we can have a total liberation, we really need to know that personally something is wrong with us, and we really have to rethink and to redefine our education. My brother, you talk about education. Education is good, but which kind of education do we give in Africa? We need to redefine our curriculum. The curriculum we have in Africa, it does not teach how to be a very good leaders. It only taught us how to be a leaders of tomorrow, a corrupt leaders. Look into all the religion institutions in Africa. They are very corrupt. And how can we try to change this? Because all these little things, they really have a very big effect on the Africa at large. That means that we have to redefine our education, the education that was given to the people that does not have impact on their future, education that only gives them livelihood, but not for life. This is not Mr. education.
Bimbola?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. And one person maybe, he was also referring to one of the leaders of the country, your country, Ghana, and maybe you have also referred to that and to answer that particular thing.
Well, thank you very much. There's one thing that is very clear and that must be understood by everybody in Africa, that Africa does not owe its development, its progress to anybody. Nobody owes Africa its development. Africa owes itself its transformation, its development. For example, you cannot blame Europe for the failures of Africa perpetually. You cannot blame America for the failures of Africa perpetually, all the time. There must be a point when our own inadequacies, our own failures must be understood by ourselves so we can correct them. I do believe in the thought that we need a mental transformation. It's critical, there's a need for it. You can imagine that, for example, in Nigeria, you have one minister giving an amount of $1 billion to go and do a project, and he keeps the money to himself. Until a new government comes, nobody could come and say, bring the money, it's for the people. He's keeping the money for himself. You cannot imagine that you go to a minister's house and then you take $1 million out of it. You cannot imagine that the first lady of that country was running away with about $900 million in different currency denominations to go and save somewhere in Europe. This is the kind of mentality we need to transform. I cannot imagine why all of you who are here would leave your country, come back here, and you are living for life. The idea should not be to run away from Africa and go and live somewhere perpetually, just stay there and die there. No. You must have a mind to come here, transform yourself, go back to develop your people. The investment you make must be to transform your people, to create opportunities for your people. When Nkrumah left the shores of Ghana, he stored away to the United States of America. He went, gained knowledge, he didn't stay there. They offered him a job to lecture, he said no. They offered him several jobs, he said no. He came back to the UK, did his PhD. Up to a point, he was offered all kinds of jobs. He said no, my idea is to come back to Ghana and change the people of Ghana, the circumstances of the people of Ghana. That is what we should be thinking about. The liberation of the African is not just about independence from political control. It's about liberation of our mentality, our commitment to supporting the transformation of our economies, because, come to think about it, economy and business is about profits. You cannot relate with another country and expect that that country should be humane. Oh, this is a poor country, Ghana. Let's forgive them. Let's give them free things. No. The German people want profit so they can take care of themselves. The British want to create opportunities for themselves. They are not meeting the Africans because they want to be humane and kind to the African. So you must understand that we are also relating with them so we can create opportunities for our people. But instead, you create the opportunity, get the money, run back to the same Europe, buy houses there, save the money in Switzerland, and go back there and meet the people face to face in their poverty, riding on bad roads, and then seeing them die of hunger and no drugs in the hospitals. So we just have to understand who we are, so we can change our mentality, we can change ourselves, we can be committed into transforming our economies, and we should blame ourselves for the changes and failures we are seeing today. If we cannot blame ourselves, take a little part of the blame. The old nationalist argument about whoever was responsible for our colonialism must be blamed does not bring food to the table at all. It is time for Africa to take upon itself the commitment to transform him or herself. It's necessary and it must be done. The G20 is an opportunity being seized by Europe. And we know that the 2063, I was there at the United Nations General Assembly when the 2063 agenda was launched. The idea was for Africa to now begin to realize its own potential and be able to produce for itself. And that idea was realized by Nkrumah several years ago. Now let's go back there. That was the idea. So the G20, we launch it, but we don't have the resources to execute it. So G20 seizes the opportunity to say that, look, let's take these people, let's give them the structure, let's give them the money to do it, because they don't have the money to do it. Tell me the one African country that has the capacity to do all these things. We only think about it, it's a good idea. We talked about Lagos, the Lagos Plan of Action. The Bench report came to destroy it. We think about NEPAD. Now, NEPAD and the 2063, now G20 is coming to destroy it. Because you don't have the clouds. Let's develop the clouds. Let's know what we are about so you can't be cheated. Thank you.
I think we have not only to complain. I think it is necessary to have also a look to the way forward. And if I'm looking to the position of the African countries, there's a lot which has happened. and especially the partnership of the European Union and African Union has continued to pave the way to have a real partnership and to leave this relationship donor-recipient. I think this is very crucial that this way is now done. And we will have in Abidjan this autumn the big summit of the African and European Union leaders. And they will conclude a new partnership on exactly the question of resilience in Africa, which is very, very much important, concerning the political stability, absence of war, civil wars, and see the positive role also of the African peace organizations. And we see also that they concentrate, that more money and more projects are concentrated to help the youth of Africa. And the ambition is to create every year 20 million jobs. And if you go to the big towns of Africa, as you have done it, and you see there 17 years old boys especially, being there in the street, thousands and thousands, you can really cry, because there's no solution from the side of the African governments. And I think they have an obligation. And I'm very, very optimistic that this time it is possible to conclude such an agreement between the European Union and the African Union, where the question is not only quantity, but also quality of education and also of jobs.
I just want to bear in mind that after we answer the question, that the last point we have to answer what is the future from an African perspective, what Mrs. Randzio-Plath also tried to look more into the future and what is to be done, what's the pavement to do so. And we just have time for 2 to maximum 3 questions or statements.
Maybe you have to set it up the time, the point of the future of before the panel, before the time. That is important to get information of you so that we can have the last question round. It's better that we finish with the future before we get it for you.
Okay. If it's okay for you also.
I think that will be better.
I have one question. You became greens from Nigeria.
Okay, we shall take your question then. I'm sorry to be interrupted.
And sorry, we are also afterwards, we are here to answer questions and yeah.
The future of Africa. I think that the future of Africa looks very, very bright. That's on a very positive note, like you just said. All of you who are here certainly know how much you contribute towards the development of back home. All of you here send money back home, and we know that billions of money is sent to Africa, and that money contributes to development. Now, if you look at the Agenda 2063, it's all about PPP. It's all about Africa that is able to solve its own problems. It's all about Africa whereby the youth are involved. Where does the future lie? I look at the future, sometimes I get a feeling that the young Africans have kind of lost hope in their governments, and they are now thinking we are doing it ourselves. The positive thing is that the young Africans are embracing brain gain. Many of us are coming here, especially people who are in more of in science and technology, and they are learning things here after the university. There are so many of Nkrumahs today who think that, I think Europe is not paradise for me. They come here, they get the knowledge, and they go back. So the future of Africa is certainly very, very bright. Coming back to this pact, but also to make reference to here in Germany, the Marshall Plan meets Africa, which is about the private-public partnership with Germany here. I think that before all these different strategies are implemented, if we really want to see a brighter Africa, then it is very important to recognize when we talk about the private sector, who are we targeting? Are we going, if you look at some African countries, if you look at the establishment of privatization, where World Bank came up with the strategies, you have to privatize, you have to commercialize, you have with all this modernization, but we didn't have a private sector in the bigger part of Africa. So what happened was that the politicians just came together, you, Falke, and me, and you, we are in government, let's come together and form a company and buy these parastatals. That's why you find that in the bigger part of Africa, the people who have the political power also have the economic power. So when you manage the politics of a country and you also manage the economics of the country, it is very, very difficult to get these people out of power. It's very difficult to talk about fighting corruption. So when you talk about today we want to invest in the private sector, before analyzing who is behind the private sector, you're giving the money to the same politicians. That's where my problem is. You know, my opinion is that it sounds rather abstract, but how about identifying the young Africans who are here, who have learned things here, how are they doing, and connecting these people with the German investors, with the Western investors who want to go and invest there. Otherwise, if you just think, okay, there is this organization in country B, it's a private sector, we are giving them money. I'm afraid to some extent this money will be coming back to the very politicians and they will stick there and will not leave.
And the private sector is also speaking about sustainable development, but meaning somehow different part of that expression than other, for example, the ecological people or the social improvement of sustainable development. So one has to look also into what area is going forward, in my point of view.
Just a quick clarification using an example. If you look at a country like Kenya, I don't know how many Kenyans are here. Recently we had in the news that a liter of milk in Kenya is more expensive than a liter of petrol. Why? Because the president owns 90% of the milk industries there. Now, if you come here and you say you want to invest in milk, in a milk company in Kenya, it's very likely that you're going to invest to share a partnership with the president. Are you giving money to the private sector or you're giving money to the very politician? This is where the problem is.
Let me just quickly add to that, which is unforgiving. Africa has close to 70% of the actively engineered economic sector in agriculture. Yet Africa imports 350 billion food items. This should not happen. This should not happen at all. It is a shame, and we have to get our act together. Then to look at where Africa is going, the future, what we see now with the partnership 2063, it is a vision, it is partly a dream, but we cannot dream unless we go to sleep. We must have a vision. People who have visions keep walking without sleeping, and that is so very, very important to us. Looking to 2063, long ago, this is a dream about Pan-Africanism. It's about reliving the Pan-African spirit, started by a Jamaican advocate who was in prison in the United States for a long time, Marcus Garvey, before Kwame Nkrumah took that over to Africa. And Garvey was very, very firm, trying to bring Africans back to Africa, until the United States said, no, you're not going to do that. And he was arrested, put in prison for 3 years, and then deported to Jamaica. So it's a wide dream, and we brought it to Africa. Kwame Nkrumah saw this dream happen, and now we are seeing it for 2063. My vision is broad. Africa is rising, and Africa must rise. But what we must do is to get ourselves together, to rise together. Men and women must rise together. Children must rise. Education must get to the limit of rising. Investment must rise. We are looking at all these things. It's about Africa rising, and we cannot look back, because if you want to realize a dream, like the king said, I had a dream. And yes, he had a dream that one day Africa and all Africans will get to that promised land by our effort together. And let's try to make it happen by all means, my brothers and sisters.
Thank you. I think I really have to be modest. I really have to be modest the way I view the future of the Africa. I think there is hope in Africa, but at the same time also I think I'm not very much optimistic the way the things is going in Africa. Because I'm a kind of person, I try to be more realistic and try to deal with the reality of what is really happening in Africa. If we look the Africa we have today, Africa, most of our resources, you know, we try to export them from Africa, which means that we did not add values, you understand, to what we produce. And if you also see, and this thing has continued even up to this moment, and if you see the way, the direction our leaders are going, they don't create opportunity for the youth. Most of the young people, the graduate, you know, they are in the risk, you know, to cross the Mediterranean Sea and desert to look for a better life. So I think there is hope in Africa, but I really say that I'm not very much optimistic. But at the other way around, I think that the African also, the civil society, we should be politically engaged. We should not try to ignore the issue and the political ethic that is really happening in Africa. And that is the reason why even most of the Africans that we are in diaspora, we really have to stand against this G20. For me, I see this G20 policy system as a new project to liberate, as a new project to continue, you know, the colonization. And as I will just finish, we will have like a demonstration against the G20. And that will be on the 24th of June next month. And I want every African to come out. This demonstration is being organized only by refugees and immigrants. These people, they're responsible for the flights, they're responsible for a lot of things. People are still dying on the Mediterranean Sea. African people are dying in the desert, but they never talk about it. But when something happens, when there is terrorist incident happen, if only 10 people die, you will see that the whole information will be on the media. They don't care about our life, they don't care about our continent, and we have to come out and demonstrate against this inhuman policy. We have to tell them and try to remind them that they're also part of the misfortune that we have in Africa. Even though we Africa have to take our responsibility. Let us demonstrate against Thank you very much.
Everybody knows the date now, 24th of June in Hamburg here. Last but not least, Mr. Pelpuo, but Mrs. Randzio-Plath wanted to add also something.
I would like to say that we have also a civil 20 here in Hamburg in June, and we will discuss also with civil society from Africa. But I have to realize that in many African countries, it is very dangerous and difficult to work as an NGO. And I think we should really oblige also the G20 to do everything that civil society organizations are enabled to work in all countries of this world. I think this is very, very important, because we need not only the governments, we don't need only the parliaments, we don't need only the communes to participate in structuring the situation in Africa, the relation between Africa and European Union, for example. The population is also an actor. And therefore, I really think it is very, very important that civil society meets on all levels. And I also would like to underline that it was very difficult to establish this joint Africa-European partnership. And on both sides, there has not been done enough. Neither on the European Union side, nor on the African side. And I understand that, of course, in African countries, the problems are more challenging for the specific African country than the united approach. But I think that really we could achieve more if Africa understands that there is a unity, and that if they promise, if they do an agreement, they should also to carry it out and to implement the obligations. And here I think there is a future for the cooperation between Africa and the European Union. And I think that in the United Nations, and you mentioned also the UN Agenda 2030, there was a good cooperation between the 28 European Union member states and the 54 African Union member states. And this is also something which was very, very supportive for the success of the UN agenda for social, ecological and economic sustainability. And Europe and also Africa both need, like the world as such, not only the G20 sustainable development in order that this planet Earth can survive. Thank you.
Okay, last but not least, Mr. Pelpuo.
Thank you very much. This observation is made because I have lived it. And it is that there's too much dependence in Africa. The African governments all over, all of them depend on somewhere else. They either depend on a bilateral relation that will produce grants for them, or they depend on an IMF or World Bank or some other organization that can give them money. That dependence must be stopped. There's so much dependence also on from the citizens on government. Everybody they think that the government owes them jobs. Once you finish school, they are all looking up to government for jobs. Nobody is thinking about investments. Even when you take the trouble to run away to Europe, you still come here and you depend on somebody to employ you. You are not thinking about going back to invest. That same old dependence is still in us everywhere we go. That has to be stopped. The other one is that if G20 can be negotiated so that we can get the benefit of it, let's go ahead. If we say no to it, what is the alternative? I want to see an alternative that will put the African in a better state than what we are now. If you have nothing, poor men don't fight. You go to fight, you fail. We fought against signing compacts with Europe, fought it very hard. Nigerians said they won't sign. Ghana eventually said, well, we too will not sign, but at the end, we had no alternative. So if you are poor, you don't fight for long. What is the alternative? What are we thinking? That if we don't do it this way, what is the best way to do so we will benefit? If you don't have an alternative and you kick against it, you are alone in the world. So I want to see a more negotiated position to put Africa in a strong position to say we are better when we deal with others. In the world of international relations, it is self-interest. Self-interest first. Europeans will think about their interests. Africans should think about their interests. Thank you.
Can I say something quickly about dependency?
I think we have to go to the public of that now. So now you have you said a lot of things, interesting things. You talk about revolution, about no to G20, or maybe it's a possibility. I think all ideas can combine where we can just go somewhere without fighting. We don't have to be ready to fight. We have to go somewhere. We don't just go and sit down and negotiate with them. In the Independence Day, they do the same thing. Nowadays, when we go somewhere, when we fight, demonstrations like we are making pressure to the negotiation. People will sit there. You can't just go there and sit and say you will change things. Africana have to be straight down about the transformation. I have a question here about the religions. The religions are a mode of transformation. What about the spirituality in Africa? All the churches, we just train people to the wrong direction. That was the main brain. How the decree for the government to close all the churches in Africa to make the spiritual churches and African churches. That's a way for the transformation. I have a question here from someone about the moral. What about the moral? We can teach us the moral in the school. The politicians are corrupt. Why? We teach them so. We teach them. What's the formula? What's the example? So the moral have to be taught to the children in the school. What about the moral? In Germany, for example, if you cheat money, you go to the prison. This is a rule, right? So I have a question here, 2 questions I will take, and then we close it, right? 2 questions now. So you, yeah, 2, 3, 3 questions, you, come to me. I have you. 3 questions, come to me.
Good afternoon. I keep it short, but if it comes in the matter of Africa, one becomes very emotional because I've jotted some things down and I'm going to go
louder and louder.
Okay, right. I mean, I'm trying not to become emotional of what I've written down because the last but one speaker made mention of brain drains. And it's a very important aspect in Africa because I don't think there are less qualified people in Africa. There are more than enough qualified people. But where do they leave this intelligence? They leave it right here in Europe. Some even are not made use of. I know a lot of students in Germany, they do a lot of good researches, and where do they this land? And I think if African politicians and Africa per se wants to do an impartment, and it's about time all these researchers to go through and see which is suitable for the African continent, because they pay a lot of money to do such researches, and there are thousands and millions of workshops and researches lying down unused here in Europe, and nobody is making use of them. And these are the brains of Africa, which are lying either here in the European coffers. So if you need good work, please find out the work your people have done. And coming back to dependency, you're talking about dependency. Who is dependent on who? I think we are talking about surplus dependency, because Europe came to Africa because they needed Africa, and they're dependent on Africa to build their industries, to build their factories, right? And that's why they were in Africa to get the resources. And today, Africa is relying on the surplus resources of Europe. The things that Africa doesn't need comes back to Africa. So we are not dependent on Africa. It's a matter of redefining what dependency is. We have a lot of values in Africa which is not even made mention of. Talking about drinkable waters in Africa. Most of our drinkable waters in Africa are contaminated. And I asked one, how does that come about? Ghana is having more than 22 rivers in Ghana with a section of river water. All the rivers are contaminated.
Yes, excuse me, because we need one.
This is contribution.
We need to close it down. Yeah.
I have a stand over here.
Yes.
If you need to know more about me, I'm here with the Africa Art and Culture. Stand over here.
Okay.
We can talk about. I have more to give to Africa.
Very good. Very good. Yes. Maybe the next question.
This time is very short. We can just keep it short, brother.
I think so much has been said here. What we do very well in such forums is to be so clever and good to enumerate all the problems that is happening to our continent, and we do very, very well. Most of here, like my brother here, was once in the government, and I don't know if he has something to say about what he was able to achieve, because if you look at Ghana, from what my brother is saying, they have done worse. You see, to be honest with ourselves, the African leaders, since after independence, have done more harm to their own country, to their own continent, to their own people, like more than the centuries of colonialism. This is a shame, and whoever has been in any position in Africa must bow his head in shame. And it's as if we have been cursed with the type of leaders we have. Honestly, our leaders are not matured to occupy the position they are occupying. And we must also take a responsibility because we put them there. We are all responsible for all these problems that is engulfing our continent. You see, poverty. I am in the 60s, the standard of living in Africa, and even the time of colonialism, was not very much different from what was in Europe. After independence, we have retrogressed, and they have advanced. Look at Korea, South Korea and Ghana were at par when we took over the realm of affairs. We were even a little slightly better than South Korea. Now look at South Korea now, and let us put these things down once and for all. We are not the only people who have been colonized. Europeans have colonized Europeans. Asians have been colonized. All over the world, this colonialism has happened everywhere. France has colonized England before.
Okay.
Why do we continue to this blame game? We need leaders. Once you put it there, you did more harm than what you inherited. And as long as we don't stop, and as long as we don't appoint the right leaders, this forum will continue and we continue to enumerate the problems,
yes,
and we don't know God knows
what
how
you're
long.
saying. Thank you very much. We just have one more question. And
Thank you for the emotional part of the conference. The last question, and then we'll take it over.
I feel uneasy. People are mentioning Korea and comparing those things to Africa. We've studied these cases so deeply. The 4 Asian tigers, Singapore, Korea, these 4 Asian tigers can never be compared to African countries. We have done too much research for them. Hong Kong, Singapore, Korea, somebody's mentioned, were helped by Great Britain and the United States. And that is not a viable example when we're talking about African development. So please, do your research well, make sure you have done these studies very, very well. It is sad. So that those 4, we call them the 4 Asian tigers, who developed so quickly, did it with the help of Great Britain and the United States, not by themselves. Okay, so make sure you have that in your notes.
Yes. We refuse to get the help. We were so militant against
Thank you
the
very much. Thank you. I think it's very important, so if there are possibilities that we continue to discuss, just give us opportunity because people are so interesting. I want just to say all of you thank you to organize this African Day, but it's very important to know it's not only one day for Africa. Africa is every day. Every day people are dying in the sea. We never see them, and we organize only one day. If you can really try to organize more African Day. Thank you very much. But what we need that to give answer to contribute is to first to say to Europeans and the Western people to give us back what they took. First, to make this partnership. And we need this. And in Africa, we need freedom. If they don't leave us free to work, to stay in our countries, we cannot develop. And this partnership, 70 years ago, as African first countries get their freedom or that their, how to say it, independence to today, how many partnerships they signed? How many partnerships they signed? What G20 partnership can bring us? I think nothing. European, they take from Africa human beings as slavery. Today, they take resources. Tomorrow, what they will take? No partnership with Europeans. We have to cut it. And I will finish to say this Africa, Pan-Africanship. Gaddafi tried to build Africa. Everybody know it. Who destroyed these Africans? It's Europeans destroy it.
Okay.
1 month ago, West African from France, they get up, they say we don't need France. Which European country defend this civil society demand? No one. We cannot thinking and saying African intellectual will develop Africa. No intellectual of African can develop Africa. Thank you very much. I cannot calm down because when you say ONGs, as you know Africa, we sleep in houses. As you know Africa, we drive a car. As you know Africans, we eat food. As you know Africa, we drink water. It's not Europe to give us food. And what I want to do the last time, thank you very much. The last thing. Can you give me chance for one thing? Give me chance. Okay. Give me chance for one thing. For this new partnership, what I want from Europe is to give African country chance to come in Europe to exploit first the petrol in Norway, to exploit in Europe first, like how they exploit us. That is what we want from there in this partnership. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I know it's getting so interesting at the moment, but we need to close down. And I thank all our guests for being here. Now it's getting good, exactly. Professor Asumah already mentioned. They're still around, so if you have questions, maybe you can just ask them briefly and they can answer you the questions direct. But we are just very happy that we really got your interest and more people are now coming and join the conversation. And as we see, we had different opinions about the G20, and what I can say, it's about us Africans. We are the ones, we know what we want, and we should take the option, we should make it happen. And it's about mental transformation, it's about trade. Now it's time for trade. Africa is rising, Africa is now. There's a new young generation who's aware, and we here in the diaspora, we can connect, and I think better things are happening, are coming, and the future of Africa is going to be great. This is my optimistic point of view. And thank you all for attending, for your time. and for giving us an insight. So for you, please follow the G20 discussions in June. There's some conference coming up in Berlin. So just be aware, be open for other activities, as the young man mentioned, what is happening in Hamburg. So just be aware and try to, do the best what you can.
Yes.
Yes.
So other solution is just go to the tent over there. The confederation will just go further. Just backside. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Aucun pays africain qui vient exploiter l'Europe. Pourquoi il ne doit pas chance aux Africains de venir exploiter l'Europe? Dis-moi ça, c'est ça on dit partenariat. Tu rappelles l'Algérie a bien exploité l'Europe.
Yes, it is.